From a professional soccer career to becoming a driving force in the mortgage industry, Brian Covey has shown what it takes to find your competitive edge. Get off the sidelines and get in the game. Find your competitive edge with Brian Covey.
What's up, guys, and welcome back to another edition of Finding Your Competitive Edge. So today, we're really fortunate because one of my friends, one of the places I spend a whole lot of time with, he's the CEO of Iron Tribe Fitness. So Forrest Walden is going to talk about not only his journey of building out, I believe, one of the most elite fitness communities, and where you see me post about Iron Tribe all the time if you follow along, but also his journey and how he's building out kingdom-focused men and women to really do more than just build a business, more than just make money, and the things that we're often talked about in your entrepreneurial journey that you need to be thinking about. How do I make a lasting impact and also take care of my family and bring others on the journey? So I'm excited to unpack that, and also leadership culture, how to build a strong team. You got to think about, if you know health and fitness, it's much like financial services. The turnover, bringing in talented people, it is a hard industry to make sure you're equipping your team to win and getting the right people there. So we're going to talk about all that and more. So let's jump right into it. Forrest, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
How about it? Brought you from Birmingham.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Excited to drive up today.
So we've got some visits, I'm sure, to see the crew.
Yep.
And shout out to our group over with Austin and Casper and the fam.
I think I might drop in tomorrow morning, grab a workout.
So I remember back when you dropped in, I don't remember if it was a couple years ago, and you came in, and I think we might have had somebody else that was in there. And I was like, oh, this is really cool that you don't often see sometimes CEO, president, people from the organizations drop in, but you're active, and people may not know this, but take them back to when Iron Tribe started out of your garage, like before it was what we know Iron Tribe to be today.
Yeah, I'll go back just a little bit further because this is all I've ever done. I started training people at Auburn in 1996 for free. I had no idea you could make money as a personal trainer, but I was a bodybuilder. And I was a bodybuilder because I tried out and made the cheerleading squad at Auburn.
Oh, yeah.
And I was the smallest guy by 30 pounds. And I said, something's got to change. And it's the first time I can remember setting a written goal with a plan to accomplish it. And I put on 30 pounds in 3 months, and my whole world changed. I went from this shy, introverted kid who didn't trust his own voice to a guy who was on the mic in front of 85,000 people. Met my wife doing it, worked out really well.
Yeah.
But that led to bodybuilding because I wanted to be competitive with it, which led to people saying, well, how do you get arms? How do you get abs? And I'm like, well, I'll show you. And I found out I loved it. So that led me to personal training, which led me to this crisis of I'm trading time for money. I read my first business book ever, a little book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You might have heard of it.
Great one.
It's the first time I realized, oh my gosh, I'm trading time for money. How do you create leverage in a service where, like personal training? And so I found a franchise concept out of Colorado called Fitness Together. Became the first franchisee in the Southeast at 24. Grew that to 3 states and 55 locations as a master franchisee.
Wow.
Then I saw the industry changing, and I said, well, we were this one-on-one high-end boutique. Every time you came in, you're in your own room with your own equipment, with your own trainer. And I saw the industry going group. I wanted to pivot. They didn't, but they wanted my territory back. And so I sold my territory back and said, if you'll waive my no-compete, which they did.
Nice.
And so that opened the door for me to do Iron Tribe. Now, to your point, how you started the show, I was already doing it in my garage with a bunch of friends, but I was still this master franchisee of this personal training concept. And man, I just knew, like, this is the future. This is what I love. This is what I want to do. And so when I started, we moved from my garage to that first location, but it was always like, man, I want to scale this thing.
I love that. I love that you go back too, because I knew that you were a cheerleader, but I didn't know you put on 30 pounds and got into bodybuilding. And so it just tells your commitment to what's there. So for people that are listening, I had some friends that did cheerleading. It's probably one of the most underrated in the sense of, like, you look how strong and how fit those guys and the girls are. We're like, the things that you're able to do. How did that translate when you got into bodybuilding? Did you do that more for the physical side, or were you doing it because you had to be strong to do some of the things?
A little bit of both. I think mainly I was so enamored by how my world changed by changing my physical body. But what changed the most, I started reading every single, and still to this day, read every single thing Arnold Schwarzenegger writes.
Oh, yeah.
And he's so big into the mental side of it. I started changing my stories. And it's the first time I realized I was telling myself really, really crappy stories. And so I started telling myself empowering stories, even though I didn't really believe them at the time. And more started changing. And so I thought, well, then what could I do next? And bodybuilding was kind of the next logical thing. And so I just haven't stopped challenging my stories.
I love it. So I had a friend introduce me to that when I was playing college soccer, and they were doing bodybuilding on the side, and they'd stopped playing and all that. And I remember it was the mental side you're talking about. I'd never trained like that. Really, we didn't lift weights in soccer. And so I'm listening to the story. I'm like, man, I can remember back. We would go into Gold's Gym in Memphis. I had no idea what I was doing.
Sure.
And so I love this about Iron Tribe too. I love you to take us through this, because in the garage, and I think about too, a lot of us are intimidated. You may see people in the gym today and you're like, man, they just got it all figured out. And you watch an Arnold Schwarzenegger video or his stuff, pumping iron back in the day and all. You're like, well, this is a place for fit people. But it's not really true. When you got started, take us back to that when it was just your original core group.
Yeah, so my initial core group were like neighbors. I was like, I'm going to build out this gym for me in my garage, and do you guys want to come over? And so my wife, who's sitting outside, she'd tell you, she's like, it went from 2 or 3 people to 17 pretty quickly. And she was waking up to people dropping their deadlifts and listening to loud music. And after about a year, she was like, hey, this seems like it's growing. You might want to, go actually do something with this. But yeah, it was guys who weren't into working out, and they weren't fit, and they were just friends of mine who were neighbors. And all of a sudden they're caring about their 5K times and their deadlift. And I was like, man, the power for me, that was the first time I'd really felt the power of group, because everything I had done up to that point in my career, 14 years, had been all one-on-one.
Yeah.
And I could wax eloquently on the pitfalls of one-on-one training. I'll spare your listeners. But you turn into a therapist. Mm-hmm. And people just, after about a couple weeks, you try to fill the void with just talking. And I just didn't really like the therapy side of it. I didn't like that I was learning more about these female clients than I ever should learn. And the group just kills that. You can't talk to your coach because you're too worried about what everybody else is doing and losing to the person in your group. And I was like, this is what I've been looking for.
I love it. And I'd love to know too, when you did the franchises to start out before when it was individual, what were some of the lessons you learned? Because I think it's a very hard business. I think it's relatable to when somebody's opening an insurance company or financial service company. Like, they just got the one, and they're kind of one-to-one. What did you learn through that franchise growth?
So many things. Okay, so I never studied business. I studied fitness. I got a degree in exercise science. I was studying Arnold, and all of a sudden I opened my own business. And now I was responsible for payroll, scaling myself, finance, all the things, and I was clueless. So I told you the only business book I'd read at that point was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Well, the second was The E-Myth.
Oh, yeah.
And that rocked my world. My franchisor handed it to me on the day I opened. He said, you've been a personal trainer. You are now someone who sells personal training services. Never underestimate the difference. And that's really when my education began. And the first thing I had to figure out is my franchise company had zero clue when it came to marketing. They had good systems once you got them in the door, but they didn't know how to get them in the door. They didn't. I was like unit 12.
Wow.
And so it became a lifelong obsession with marketing. And direct response marketing is really what I've studied heavy and hard. I actually got over-relying on it because everything I did was through print, that I was actually a laggard to the digital game. We can talk about that later. Yeah. But marketing and just seeking out education to help me grow the business side of it, because I've always understood the delivery and product side of it. Neemna says knowing and loving the product side can actually be your biggest limiter, because you don't go learn the things you don't necessarily love. But the fun part is I love business. And so now I love, how do I convert someone's mindset to actually come in my gym? How do I overcome that story of that's just for fit people that look like Brian and Forrest? No, it's not. I mean, my class this morning in Prime, it was 76-year-old man, 53-year-old woman, all different shapes and sizes. And so we really try to tell that story to overcome those stories of this is not just fit people. These, and I love when people say, well, I'd have to get in shape before I went there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, that's like saying you need to take a bath before you get in the shower.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't make sense. Just get started. We'll meet you where you are.
Yeah, and all the stories I know within our tribe in Franklin, I just go, I know where a lot of these people were, and the ones that either lost weight or, they were runners and they wanted to gain strength. They've come in just as they are. And we were talking about this morning's workout, and I love because I can look around our class and go, man, there are people that are great at certain areas and domains, but they're there to get better at all these different areas. And I think about, I know you got kids, our 3 kids, like there's a lot of requirements on you in life, like carrying suitcases, carrying your kid on your back when they're tired, like
absolutely
just doing stuff. Even this morning, our youngest, we're taking out the garbage and doing stuff. I'm like, wouldn't it stink if you were out of breath, you couldn't do these simple functions around and be that person that you were there. So I love you bring that up, because people often don't join. And I'd love for you to talk about that, as you probably learned this some in the marketing. I'd love to know that marketing side of how do you then attract people that are thinking, this may not be for me?
What I like to speak to is, what is the result that they're after? Because no one wants to work out. No one wants to put in the work. But I'm 47. And what I see is this gap starting to grow wider and wider between my friends who don't take this seriously and the ones who do. Because you can get away with the shortcuts and the hacks till about your mid-30s.
Yeah.
But your mid-40s, like, you can't get away from, you need to be doing mobility and all this type of stuff. So where does it show up? It shows up when you're on the boat and you no longer get behind the boat to surf. You just surf everybody. It shows up when you're on the slopes and you can no longer keep up with your kids. It shows up when you want to go things like ride dirt bikes with your sons, but you don't have the balance. So what I try to really challenge people is, like, stay in the game. Mm-hmm. Because when you opt out of the game is when everything accelerates and you start breaking down, because now you're not putting yourself out there. So how do you stay in the game? You train. You train like an athlete. But the goal is not necessarily being an athlete. The goal is, literally 2 weekends ago, my 16-year-old son beat me in one-on-one basketball for the first time ever. And I gave him everything I had. I backed him down, fadeaway jumpers. I went old school Jordan style on him. Like, he plays varsity as a sophomore. I can't beat him anymore.
Yeah.
He had to earn that, right? I was out of breath. I was gasping. But, like, I want to be the dad who's still able to get out there and play and hold his own with a varsity basketball player. And to me, if that doesn't resonate with you, I have a hard time understanding you. We probably can't hang out. Like, what is the thing that you still want to do? What is the thing that you still want to be in the arena? You know, maybe it's mountain biking, maybe, you know, skiing, all these examples. But in order to do that, you've got to be in the gym. Mm-hmm. And so when you sell it that way of what is this thing that lights you up, well, don't you realize the only way you're going to continue to do that past 50 is be in the gym. And so it's much less about going there and sets and reps and deadlifts. And it's just a gateway to go do what you actually want to do.
Hey guys, it's Brian here. I hope you are enjoying the show. By the way, if you're an entrepreneur or a solopreneur looking to grow your personal brand, make a bigger impact, maybe increase your leads, and grow your revenue, let's help you get started today by connecting up with my friends over at the Brand Builders Group. You've heard me talk about them, but if you're new here, this is definitely the first step to get you started in turning your reputation into revenue. Head over to freebrandcall.com/Brian Covey. Again, to set up your free brand call, go to freebrandcall.com/Brian Covey to set up a free strategy call with one of the team at Brand Builders, and they will dive into your specific goals for how you want to grow your personal brand. I can't wait to hear how it goes.
We were talking about that the other day because we went on a ski trip, and all of my kids now, they all snowboard. And we're at that point too, almost like the basketball thing, where my 15-year-old, I've taken him enough now, he's good.
Yeah.
And I have to try. So I'm like, why? Whether it's running or those things, and you want to stay with them as long as you can. I love you said something too, I don't want people to miss this. You're selling the result people want. So how do you get to that as clients? I think this could be relatable to somebody's buying a home, they're selling a home, they're getting a financial service product, whatever your product or service is. How do you uncover that result that they're desiring as they're starting to have conversations?
Case studies and storytelling, right? Document results and make sure your case studies are in multiple forms and in that you're highlighting both genders and different stages of life. And, you know, because as coaches and as gym owners, we can sometimes get enamored with the guys who are performing well and doing big lifts. But what we've really tried to challenge ourselves with is be more excited about my 76-year-old neighbor. This is a true story. Next door neighbor asked me to come over and help him move a generator. As he was telling me how heavy it was, I picked it up and put it in the back of his truck. And he was just dumbfounded. Well, he ends up walking to my gym about a month later and is like, what can you do for an old guy like me?
Wow.
Never worked out in his life, 76. His wife runs an antique business. Now he's helping her move furniture. Now his doctor's like, I don't know what in the world you're doing, but keep it up. Now he can do a full squat now. He couldn't even do a half. So it's like this, I can get just as jazzed about that story and Mr. Jim changing his entire ability to move and participate in life as I can about someone who's coming in and maybe maxing out their back squat. Like we love all those stories. So my point is, I always I've trained my management team and my marketing team is to find those stories and tell them really well, because you can't argue with someone's direct results.
Yeah.
Right. You can argue against claims and hype and offers and guarantees, but when you're seeing story after story. And then when you do, so we have 5 locations in Birmingham, just like there's 5 locations here in Nashville. Invariably, you're hitting all these. Oh, I didn't know that's where she went. She does look amazing. Yeah, she doesn't look like someone who just took the shot and has no muscle and is skinny. She's fit, and she can. So you just spell it through results.
Oh, I love that. And I can attest to that because I look in our group, no matter what class I go to, there's like a diversity of age and why they're there and what they're showing up for. And I often think about that as like, you guys, it appears to me, I love you to talk about this, is your customer base. I think it's one thing, especially in the health care and like gym, fitness, it's one thing to get people in, but people seem to stay. And so I love you to talk about that because retention today, like whether you're running a team, and again, mortgage, real estate, that's my world that I live in, but to get great people and for them to stay, whether they're coaches or members, what's the strategy there? Because to me, it seems to outperform the competition in what I see.
Yeah, so we have this on our core values. We picked this graphic that we think is what we call our flywheel effect, and it's straight from Jim Collins, Good to Great. I'm not smart enough to come up with this, but we spent a couple hours really diving into what is the beginning of our flywheel. How does our economic engine really work? And what we have decided is our flywheel is full-time careers in the fitness industry, because it's such a fragmented industry. There's very few ways to really build a career. So if we can get full-time people to get a full-time career opportunity, then they can execute our systems. When they execute our systems, we can over-deliver value. When we over-deliver value, we can retain people, both at the staff level and at the client level. When we retain people, we command higher than normal margins, which means that we can reinvest back into creating full-time careers. And so that is our flywheel, and it starts and ends with full-time people. And that was really born out of my experience of Fitness Together. Was not that way. It was pay to play. A client didn't come, you didn't get paid. It snowed, you didn't get paid. You took vacation. So trying to keep coaches in an industry where you're getting up super early or you're staying late, and it's sometimes like Groundhog's Day, and then they don't feel like they have a real career, that was a huge issue that we had to overcome.
Yeah, and you've done it because I watch it, and it's like it is the first place that I know is like it's very career focused, and you see that you get the professionalism, which I think also then attracts people that appreciate the professionalism. Like, well, my coach is going to be here, you know, right. And like they actually care about it. They've got a career. They're not just showing up, to your point, to like just earn an hourly wage. Is they're there. As you've scaled your teams, I'm curious because I look at how many locations now?
We have 31 open, 44 sold.
That's what I was thinking. I was like,
a bunch in development.
Yeah, I look at these numbers and I go, okay, as it scales out, what are some of the things that you guys, and for those that remember, we had Karen on, phenomenal. And what are the things you're looking at as you scale that out as a team? Because I think that's where a lot of companies, or I look at our group even, you start to scale out and it's harder to keep that culture. Yeah,
so many ways. But first of all, I've learned you have to be marketing for team members as hard as you market from clients. And so that means all the time, every day, ABM, always be marketing. And so have avenues that they can go to. We have landing pages, do a really good job of describing who we are, what we do, what our core values are. And then we use personality profiles, and we've built out profiles for each job. And literally we have some profiles that just looking at it, we know it won't work. And it doesn't mean they're broken. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means that this personality will not fit being on the floor. And then we have other ones that are our sweet spot. So if they can make it through that, then they move into the different stages of on the floor interview. We want to see, you might be great on paper, but can you communicate? Can you lead a group? I mean, we'll even have them, part of the process is for them to shoot a video teaching them movement. You'd be blown away how much you can learn in a 3-minute video of can they present themselves and that type of stuff. So we've just layered in all these different things to protect our time, so we're not trying to interview 24/7. We're only interviewing on the ones that kind of at least make it through these things. And so we're constantly doing that. We're constantly asking our people who work for us to refer, because that's a great source. And then we advertise for it. And then we also use recruiters on top of that, because it's one of our biggest pain points, just like I know it is for so many of your listeners in so many different industries, is talent's becoming harder and harder to come by.
I love that too. And we did a disc profile for my daughter. She's the 16-year-old, and they're doing that for college prep and all that.
Yep.
And she's like, Dad, you love this stuff. I go, I do, but I didn't always. But when you fall in love with the process and you get to know people, I love you brought that up, because, you know, I know we face this a lot, and people out there are like, you may love that person. They may have all these skills, but I don't want people to miss that of like putting them in the right spot to get them trained and up and going. I think that's what most business leaders, they just miss out on. They're like, well, I just love that person. I'm just going to put them anywhere. They don't always thrive there.
It's almost completely predictable. that they will live up to exactly the way God wired them. And you can love them too much and say, well, I'm gonna coach them up. I'm gonna help them get over this. It's not even a get over. It's their natural bent, which means they're good at other things, and freeing up their future to maybe go do those, sometimes the kindest thing you can do. But if you can shortcut yourself all the pain of a wrong hire, the onboarding, the training, the frustration to maybe a bad exit, if you can take that out of the equation, God, it just frees you up with so much more margin to do other things that matter.
I had a friend the other day sent this Covey index. I don't know if you've seen those.
I've used Covey. I've used DISC. We're Culture Index now. So
yes.
That's our biggest.
Oh, okay. So I was going to ask. And it's the first time I'd been introduced to Covey last year. And so we started using that in some of our hiring. And he broke down, okay, this is who you are and this is what you do. And I'm like, that is me.
Yeah. Isn't it so weird? It's like,
wow.
Oh, my gosh. I bet you're a high quick start.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So am I.
Yeah, and I go, but that's good. But then he goes, these are the things you need to delegate and automate and give to somebody else because
that's right.
You don't need to touch those.
Yes.
And I was like, got it. And I think that's cool as you go, well, I'd love to expand on that because you've now taken, you got the CEO role, but you've now been working with, some of our listeners probably know Garrett White, right? And I've seen all the things you're doing. You're building your brand, but you've got this kingdom focus and the kingdom blueprint and big conference coming up at the end of the month there. Talk to me about that and that journey because I can see you're stepping out more of like, and most CEOs, you don't even know who they are sometimes in a lot of companies, but you're stepping out now and you've got this conference coming up and leading from the front.
I'm going to back up just real quick, give you some context. 2007, I got rocked by David Platt. He was a traveling pastor. No one knew who he was. He was a kid. He was 28 years old. He preached a sermon that just blew my world apart. It was based off the Psalm 67, 1 and 2. And ultimately, he said, have you disconnected the blessings of God from the purposes? And I was doing really well. I was making money. I was driving a 5 Series. I had the beach house, everything. But I was like, I have disconnected it. And so I started traveling the world. I got exposed to the water crisis, the orphan crisis. I adopted a child who's now almost 14. I started a nonprofit ministry called Never Thirst that brings clean water all around the world. You're familiar with it? Yeah. I just go back there to say I really struggled with, man, I've seen kids dying from diarrhea in Sudan. How could I do anything else? How could I go start another fitness business? I should be doing this full time. But God made it very clear, I've given you different talents. Connect the two. And that's why Workout for Water exists. Iron Tribe and the Workout for Water movement has raised $5 million for Never Thirst. It's one of the largest donor arms of Never Thirst. I'm the chairman of the board, but I'm not actively working in that every day. I'm doing what I think God wired me to do, which is for-profit businesses.
Yeah.
So understanding that tension and understanding when an entrepreneur feels called by God, but I see this wrestling because I see them in the churches and I see them in my small groups of these guys who think they're second-class citizens, second-class Christians because they're making money. And so one of my favorite things in life is to come alongside a guy and say, no, here, let me show you. Like God's given, let's start in Genesis 1:28. He has commanded us to cultivate the earth, to subdue it, to show dominion over it. We're supposed to create and build, but then let's connect that with what he's doing around the world. Okay, so now fast forward. I started training under Garrett in 2017. He was the car wreck that I couldn't look away from. Opposite of me in every possible way, but actually not the more we got to know each other. But, tattoos, F-bombs, $28 million house on the sea, Lamborghinis. I was like, man, I don't want any of that, but man, your marketing message is compelling. And he spoke to there's something more. And I've always felt like there is something more. I want to keep growing. But in my Christian circles, it was like, why do you keep striving? Why can't you be content? Why can't? And I'm like, yeah, there's a place for contentment. There truly is. But man, I'm not wired up to be content. I'm not wired up to do maintenance either. Like I'm always building and creating. So at the end of the day, the more I worked with Garrett, the more I felt like I was saying, create the Christian version of this. And that has taken on a whole new life of its own. As I've taken that, I've created my own coaching group called EX3. I work with married Christian entrepreneurial men who want to maximize their life across body, being, balance, and business. Which then led, I just needed a little context. Sorry for the backstory. I'm glad you did.
This is awesome.
Little context to reach out to Garrett this year. And so I set huge targets every year. And one of my targets in business was to be co-creating content with Garrett by the end of the year. Seemed like what we call an impossible game.
Yeah.
I reached out, and to my utter amazement, he accepted my invitation. And he said, Forrest, this makes no sense, but I feel like God told me to come, so I'm coming. And so he and I are running a 3-day event in 2 weeks in Birmingham. called the Kingdom Method Blueprint, where we're going to teach the 6 savage skills every entrepreneurial leader needs in this day and age to build a movement. And that movement may be your business, it may be your nonprofit, it may be, something else. But he is a master movement builder, and he is behind a lot of the movements you have no idea he's behind. I mean, people don't know that Sean Whalen of Lions Not Sheep was one of Garrett's first clients, and there's multiple names like that. So anyway, the fact that he's coming, the fact that we get to run that event together, I'm super pumped about it. My brand's going to be there, my EX3 coaching guys are going to be there, and then I've opened it up for another 200 what I'm calling kingdom-minded leaders. I don't know who that is. That could be everything from a pastor to a mortgage broker.
Oh, I love it. I'm glad you gave the context too, because a lot of people don't know some of that, and they're like, hold on, how did you get into this? And you also broke down too what a lot of our listeners do struggle with, that because a lot of them are faith-based, and they're like, hey, I almost feel guilty for being successful over here.
Absolutely.
But I love that you connected up and put the plug in for Never Thirst, because that workout for water, I always think about, like, what are you doing then? Because there's opportunities for you. Like you said, I can serve over here, but I'm not running another business. I'm just able to then express that and support.
Connect it.
So what would you say to somebody that's thinking, okay, that's cool, Forrest, like I'm successful over here. Like, how do I get plugged in and start something or join something like that they may be thinking, okay, that's a calling, that's something I need to go do?
Well, I know for me, and I'm going to go back again to 2017. I had done all the things. I had done the convenes. I had done the vistages. I had done the YPOs. I had done church small groups. I had done my church men's group. And I couldn't find the place where I felt like I fit in. Vistage was too buttoned up, and all we talked about was business. And the guy would be 40 pounds overweight on his third wife, and he's talking about business problems, and no one in the room can go anywhere but, okay, let's look at your P&Ls and look. And I'm like over here going, can we talk about the fact that he's like pre-diabetic? And so Warrior was the first place where I found a room where I could talk about anything.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. This is a whole nother podcast. I've done a podcast on what I'm about to say. So if you're interested, I was in full blown depression, Brian, because I had hit some real turbulence in the business, and I felt like I'd lost my confidence. I had lost my way. I was starting to question everything. I was starting to question my own ability. I stopped sleeping. And so I just went to a place I never in a million years thought I would go. And so when I started to think about where can I go for help, where are the men, because I know I can't live this life in isolation. I need my band of brothers. Where are they? That's what I found in Warrior, and that's what I've recreated. I mean, even last night, I'm running a weekly call with these guys, and the ability to talk about anything and everything, and to figure out when you actually talk about it, you realize, oh my gosh, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I thought I was crazy. Biggest lie of that devil is you're alone, right?
That's right.
And so I don't know, and I'm sorry, again, that's a long-winded way of saying I searched everywhere for that room. I couldn't find that room. I had to build that room. And so certainly you can be a part of what we're doing or go be a part of what Garrett's doing. But you need to find a room. There may be others out there that I'm not aware of, but you got to be in a room where people are willing to be authentic. Because if you're not, then they're just hyping or they're hiding. They either hype makes things sound better than they are, and that's what happens at most of these business conferences. Everybody's buttoned up and everybody's crushing it, and you're awesome and you're awesome. And in reality, it's not all that awesome. Like right now, you could be listening to this going, oh, this guy's really got his stuff together. I can tell you 18 things I'm dealing with right now that are not awesome.
That's right.
Right? And that's part of building. But if you never get to talk about the pits, you have no one to lean on. And if all you do is talk about the peaks, then it's like real hypey. No one relates to you, and you feel like a fraud because man, yeah, I'm crushing it over here, but man, me and my wife aren't on the same page. She feels like I'm leaving her behind. Who can I talk about that with? So, anyway, I'll shut up.
No, I mean, so many places we could go. I would love to land it on a couple things though that you said. Is one, I'm going to jump right into the being fit piece because I think it's just. Look, I know in my life when I haven't been fit, when we had our first 2 kids, like almost 19 months apart, and I got out of shape again. It was not the best version of me, and that depression, the things that come with it. I just think there's too much attached to it to not talk about it. And you see these stories.
Yes.
So somebody might be thinking, okay, Forrest, I'm not totally overweight or out of shape or anything, but they also know they're not really competing and not fit anymore. And I think especially for the men, because that's all I know is growing up as a man. But I know there's that drive that if you're not competing anymore, you've in a way put yourself on the sideline in the bench. What have you seen, and what would you tell somebody that the importance of having themselves being fit, whatever that is for them. And I'm not saying like we talk about, you don't have to be the person that's the strongest, fastest, most fit in the gym, but you do have to compete at some level.
Yeah, we call it being weaponized. And
that.
really what I think people miss the connection of, it's a conversation of power. So think about that workout where you really didn't want to go. You had every excuse in the world not to go. You made yourself go, and at the end of the workout, you feel amazing. You feel like you overcame your self-talk, your doubts. Yeah. That's power. That's personal power. Tony Robbins said it, the most important person you're ever going to keep a promise to is yourself. And the only way to gain personal power is to keep honoring self-promises. So the first part of your day, I'm a big believer working out in the morning. But again, it doesn't matter if it's morning. It's just that you do it. Yeah. But to get that win, it sets you up to start the day in power or finish the day in power. And that power translates into over every other domain of your life. Because if you can win the self-talk about going to the gym, then you get to work and the first obstacle doesn't seem as hard.
Yeah.
Or you're dealing with something in your marriage and you'd rather avoid it and not talk about it, and you step into the tension because you're already working this muscle of power. So it's a power conversation, and people miss that. I'm not even talking about like the health benefits, the energy benefits. Yeah. That all cascades into power, but I think more importantly, it's you expressing that ability to make tough decisions and invest in yourself.
I love it. My coach always talks about standards over feelings. So you probably heard that one. And I think about that, and I always tell everybody from my vantage point, there's plenty of days I don't want to go in there.
Almost every day I could talk
myself
out of it.
There's some days I look at a workout and I'm like, well, I like this part of it. I don't like that part. Can I do just this? But your friends are going to be there. The coaches are going to be there, and the music's going to be going. Like all the things I go, I'm going to focus on the things I want that will be there. But I love what you said too is, I don't know if you find this, but there's always a middle of a workout. I was thinking when you said this, that I want to quit, that I want to go take a water break. Honestly, I'm like, man, this got really hard. And I always think about, if I'm not going to quit then, the rest of my day, like what else is going to come at me? And what other challenge can you put yourself in to compete, and then you come out the other side? You have total control.
That's right.
Over not quitting.
Yeah. You can get a win.
You get a win as you go. Come on, shift gears, because you talk about something else that I thought about that every man I think goes through, and we're right at the same age, married, businessmen with kids, struggle with this. Is one of my coaches talked about this years ago, is going through this tunnel that they have to go through, almost the depression. The things are like, I'm going to burn it all down. I'm going to sell it all. Like, you're just going to yes. You get to a point where you're like, forget it all.
Yep.
And I'd love for you to talk about that, coming through the tunnel to the other side, what your experience was. I think that's where the wisdom comes out, is like, unless you've been to that dark place of like, man, I'm done. The whole thing, like, was it all worth it? And you start questioning everything there. Walk us through a little bit of that, because I think you have some wisdom on this of coming through it.
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. Real early in my career, I speculated on a $1.3 million beach house that I had no business speculating on. And it was in the heyday when you couldn't build them fast enough.
Oh, yeah.
It was 2007. You remember those times?
Oh, I was in the business. And
when I went to sell it, it was 2008, and you couldn't give it away. And it wrecked me in a lot of ways. And I realized God can take it all away. Mm-hmm. And I think intellectually I knew that, but I didn't believe it. Mm-hmm. I was doing well. I had money stocked away. I remember thinking, Brian, I'm not sure I'm going to ever have to worry about money again. Yeah. To all of a sudden facing bankruptcy. So that was one level of learning. I really don't bring a whole lot to the table. In 17, when I went through depression and I was battling to get out of bed in the morning, I realized, oh my gosh, no, Forrest. He can take it all away. Mm-hmm. He can take away my joy. He can take away, like, he literally gives it, all of it, all my ideas, all my identity, it's all from him. And so the biggest thing I've learned is he is just as interested in me executing a great workout as he is to me walking up in my 16-year-old son's room last night, who I feel like won't talk to me, and just sitting there until he did talk to me, to me launching an event with Garrett White, to launching a nonprofit that's raised 45. Like, he is intimately connected to all of the details, and it all matters. And when I surrender it to him, he gives me the gift of vision. Mm-hmm. He gives me the gifts of ideas and drive. And stop trying to create these separate dichotomies of, okay, God, you get my 15 minutes in the morning when I'm going to read my Bible, but the rest of the day, I'm in charge. I'm calling the shots. I'm founder. I'm CEO. Like, I'm just so over that I'm like, I know that even my best ideas aren't even my ideas. Mm-hmm. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. So why would I not think he would give me the next great marketing idea, or leadership idea. Like, he's the greatest leader who ever lived. He took 12 men and he turned the world upside down. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the biggest thing I've learned.
And those are the things people want to, I think they want to know and they want to learn. Because like 070, I mean, very similar experience there. My job got eliminated and we had over leveraged and we thought, okay, we're just gonna buy these condos. They're gonna rent and do all this stuff forever. And the world crashes. Yep. And probably around 15, 16 too, the mortgage industry took another turn. 18, but it prepares you. I love how you said weaponized too, because I think people are thinking through it. You're going to teach on, you said 6 principles?
Yes.
I'd love to know the one you're most excited about sharing. Do you think will have the biggest? I know it's hard to pick probably, but.
No, it is. But, you know, people get speaking, they get selling, but what they often miss is training. And you can speak really well, but speaking is not selling, and selling is not speaking. But you have to know how to speak in order to sell. But if you don't know how to train, then you're just another voice spitting information in the front of the room. And training can look in a lot of different ways. It's how you create movement in the room. It's how you ask questions to make sure people are tracking with you. Because there's what you say, and then there's what they actually hear. So if you as a speaker, as a coach, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, if you're not constantly checking in with your people, okay, what did you hear me say? Or even in the middle of a meeting, okay, turn to the person next to you and retaught what I just said. Like, you constantly have to keep people moving in action. Walk and talks. We do walk and talks all the time. You've been in a long meeting. You've got your leadership team. Okay, everybody buddy up. We're hitting the sidewalk, 400 meters, person one sharing on this topic, coming back 400 meters, the other person sharing the same topic. You get people interacting because they need to think through and talk through and express what you're saying. So you add that element of training, then it makes your speaking and selling so much more effective. And so for some reason, we feel like we've got to be these robots with these PowerPoints and we're up front in the room. It doesn't work. We're inundated with information. It's not an information problem. It's a processing problem. So you have to use all the things available to you, kinesthetic movement and reteaching and hearing their own voice saying it. It's way more powerful than you saying it. So for you to slow down and actually wait for the room to get what you're saying instead of thinking, I'm so smart and I'm going to teach them what they don't know, it doesn't work. So training is what I'm excited about, because I'm going to demonstrate it as I'm teaching it. And they're going to be like, I've never been anything like this. I'm like, oh, that's the point. Your meetings are boring.
Yes. Oh, okay. So
that's why no one listens to you. That's why no one gets on your lives. That's why no one registers for your webinars.
Oh, okay. We got to dive into this because I came up in a very training-oriented environment, of course, with sports. But then at the bank at Wells, it was high intensity training and people would burn out. You become a table coach at some of these. Then if you got good enough, they let you facilitate and do things. But I think training's evolved. I'd love for you to talk about, because even that walk and talk that I've seen, and we've incorporated that, by the way. I think it's a cool one because when you're in motion, I think things work.
Yep.
What has changed in training, let's just say in the last 5 years, that you've seen trend-wise, or things that people should be doing and maybe the things they should not be doing around training?
Just want to make sure I'm clarify here because when I hear training, I think of the gym, but you're talking about like personal development.
Outside of the gym. So people that maybe run even a mortgage team today, real estate team, financial services team, anywhere in there. To your point, I don't see training happening.
Okay. I will start with, we no longer have the ability to quote unquote fake it till you make it. Zig Ziglar did. Because he could get up on stage and speak, and then you don't see anything from him. You don't follow him on Instagram. You don't see what people are saying. Like, we have so much access to information, and our kids are saying BS to everything we're trying to cram down their throat because they can Google it. They can TikTok it. Okay, so you have to lead. First of all, you have to live what you lead. And if you don't live what you lead, you are never going to be effective as a communicator because people see right through you.
That's right.
So if I get up there and I'm trying to train on diet and exercise and I'm 30 pounds overweight, it's going to fall empty every single time. And then secondly, you have to be vulnerable. You have to, as a speaker, be the first one to throw yourself under the bus, to give the people you're communicating to, your staff, your team, your clients, your prospects, the ability to own up to where they're falling short. But what we try to do is, hey, I'm the guy on the stage. I'm the guy communicating a message. So if I show weakness, they're not going to trust me. No, they don't trust you because you won't show weakness, and they know you're not as good as you're saying you are. Everybody screws up. Everybody's got their stuff. In fact, I'd like to do this whole podcast on how I miss stuff and how I'm struggling versus how I'm winning. But ultimately, it's breeding that trust and that authentic, like, oh, okay, I could run with this guy. Like, this guy's real. And so when you do that, and then you bolt on the training, so you give them permission to be honest, but then you give them permission to be honest with each other first. Then they come in back from these one-on-one shares, and then you take group shares. So something they now had confidence to do in a one-on-one setting, now you put them in the group and you elevate them to allow them to share. Now the whole room is getting freedom to say, okay, this is different. This I could actually job, and it just changes your whole dynamic. Then whatever you're trying to sell, and again, not sell in a manipulative way, it's like I'm basically holding a mirror to make you see the things you need to see so that my solution now makes sense. Completely different frame than front of the room selling that worked for Zig and the guys back, and even Tony in his early days.
Oh, yeah.
That worked for all of them back in the days. These big success seminars, those are getting much harder to monetize, and it's because of this dynamic.
Oh, I love that you shared that. We had a talk at the Mortgage Bankers the other day, and I started with visibility because, to your point, you can no longer hide.
No.
And if you're not visible, people go, what are you hiding?
That's right.
And so we've encouraged our leaders too, just like you've done on social, where you're showing up on there, you're sharing your journey. You're like, hey, here's what I'm learning. Here's what I'm doing. And it is not all sunshine and rainbows.
It's not. And you know what? You have to be willing to get over the naysayers. But the naysayers, the ones that don't know me don't matter. But when it's your college-age girls saying, Dad, you really overshare. And do you realize all my friends follow you? So when you talk about that stuff, they're coming to me, and I'm like, well, let me help you understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And let me tell you the story of a guy named Sean who lives in Rhode Island who flew down for my event only because he saw me living my life on Instagram. And now can I tell you the impact I've been able to have? So when you see me, know it's for a purpose, and it's not because I think I'm so great. So, but you got to be willing to have those conversations. And sometimes most often it's going to come from the people that maybe should be rooting you on the most, but they don't understand it. It's a little threatening to them, because here's the thing, Brian, you know this. As you expand and as you're willing to be vulnerable, everybody in your close circle has to be willing to play along, because then if they don't, they feel threatened.
Oh, so I'd love to ask, this is a good one. You've probably experienced this. I've been through this a few times in my career. When you want to level up and you start to, and you invest in yourself, you get these mentors around you, you start changing. How have you been able to navigate through that? Because I think you're onto something too, Forrest. Because I think about, there were people the closest to me, and they're like, why are you doing a podcast? Why are you doing a video over there? And your point, you're like, well, there's a lot of reasons to it, but it's the one person that responded and said that helped change their life, or do this or do that. And I'm showing up as the person I wish I had 5 years ago, because I couldn't find anybody.
I mean, this event that I'm throwing with Garrett, the amount of trepidation and concern and people reaching out, like even my own team, like, I'm not sure I want to come. Like, I've had to slow down and like help them understand, like, this is for a purpose, and let me show you what you're going to experience. But yeah, I mean, when I went through depression, I knew the first thing I had to do was talk about it. And I'll never forget, I remember right where I was in my room when it was about to go live. You know how Apple takes a minute to approve it?
Oh, yeah.
And everything in me wanted to pull that episode down. But it is the most listened to, most commented on, most direct texts. Like, I'm not going to put this on actually where people can see it, but hey, bro, I need to come see you.
Yeah.
And the amount of people who've ended up in my office just to tell me too, just to say, you told my story. Every time you do that, it gives permission to other people to then share their thing. And it's not always the same thing. Like, if he's willing to talk about wanting to kill himself in Hawaii, which is what it got to, then my gosh, I can tell him that I struggle with anxiety. I can tell him that I'm on anxiety meds.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just, man, you got to lead from the front.
Oh, I love that. And I always realize this personal development game, it's never ending.
It's not.
You're always learning. And I do think there is something that we didn't have growing up, but sharing this and being accountable, and you've got people around you that are counting on you, and your point, now you're weaponizing other men and women to go, okay, here's your permission slip, so to speak. Go share your story.
Yes.
Because although they're similar, they are different.
Yes.
And I believe this. I know you do. Like, God's uniquely equipped you and given you experiences, things that didn't work most of the time, to go, hey, once you overcome this and I help you overcome it, go share that.
That's right. Because I guarantee you there's a percentage of your listeners right now who are like, I like this guy, I could follow him. And there's another percentage like, this guy's not for me. But your next guest might resonate with completely opposite, right? We all have our own stories. We all have our own experiences. When we hold them back and we don't express them, that's when we miss out on the gift. And I love, I won't spend much time here, but just the parable of the talents, right?
Yeah.
And somewhere, somehow, God's honored when we take risk, because the one person who didn't take risk was the one talent slave, right, or steward, and he hid it because he misunderstood the heart of the Father. So even taking a risk of like communicating a message, it's risky.
That's right.
Because when you communicate a message, you're going to get praise and you're going to get persecution every single time.
Yeah.
But if you let the fear of the persecution stop you from sharing the story, you miss out on the gift, and you miss out on being able to help someone who needed the courage to hear that.
Oh, man. Well, yeah, we could jam on this forever. So I'm going to wrap with this because I want to make sure people have a chance. One, we're going to put the link in there so you can find everything for the event. But if for some reason they can't make the event, talk to me about the things that you're doing now, because I see you starting to move in this space. You got the new coaching thing going there. And who's that for? So somebody's listening and going, is that for me? Like, is that going to fit? And what should they expect to get out of that?
Yeah, the primary for the event or for the coaching?
Either one. Let's do both.
Yeah, really, for the event or any of the coaching, it's my avatar, who I love, who I want to serve is me, which is a married businessman with kids who has a kingdom-minded focus and really is gifted in the for-profit space, but has this heart to connect it with the nonprofit space or the mission space or the church space or whatever it looks like. That's my primary avatar. And so at the event, I believe, like when I look back and everything we just talked about, impossible if I didn't grow as a communicator, if I didn't grow as a marketer, if I didn't grow as a closer, if I didn't and my wife hates this word, if I didn't grow as a seducer, because we think of seduction as bad, but actually seduction is the number one skill of learning and drawing people to get them to the point where they can see to be able to make the decision. But if you don't have all those skills, you can't build anything. Yeah. And you have this burning desire that you feel like God has wired me up for such a time as this, but you're frustrated because no one's listening and you're not getting any traction. And maybe you're just sitting around waiting on permission from the church. And I'm real clear that God died and loves the church. It's plan A, right? Yeah. But the church is not going to start what I'm doing. The church is not reaching entrepreneurial men largely. And so what I want to do is equip and weaponize entrepreneurial men to then go back into the church and show up in different ways. So that's what we do. The event will be amazing because it'll all be around marketing and communication. In our coaching groups, it's just a whole nother level where we're meeting every week, where we have quarterly return and reports, where we set targets together, we hold each other accountable, we create a space where you can talk about anything. You can talk about your pit and your depression, or you can talk about, hey man, I just crushed it, and I need someone to celebrate with who understands it, who doesn't think I'm bragging. Yeah. So it's just a space where you can do it all.
I love it. Dude, I just want to tell you, thank you for stepping out and doing this stuff, because you don't always get to see, as you said, not everybody comments, likes, tells you all this stuff there, but it is needed out there. And some of my best friends are people like, they were pastors, or they had these callings like, okay, we need to go serve this community that's there, because then those are the people that come back to the church that are more equipped and that are there. And I love the fact too that you still got this team culture that's being built. And I love watching this because obviously I'm a member and like supportive, but it is changing the communities, because I look at like my friends are in there and I go, man, we're doing business over here just indirectly. And you've got people that you just get to do life with and you look forward to it. And so thank you for setting that up, because a lot of us were looking for things like that. And you're like, well, where is it? Whether it's the coaching group you've got, the event you got, Iron Tribe, you get to go meet some cool people, do some fun fitness things together. What's next for you?
Right now I'm trying to keep it on the rails of, I don't, it's not like I felt released from what we're doing at Iron Tribe and I'm on to a coaching thing. For some way, it all works together for me. I see these men who will never respond to my Facebook ads to join my gym, but they'll come learn how to make more money. And then when I teach them their body's their limiter, then they'll join my gym, because now they've connected that with power and production.
I love that.
And so I just continue to see, is it a blend, and I'm training my team on it, and that's why Garrett's coming in to run an event with my brand. And so, it's merging these two and building a for-purpose, kingdom-minded gym that really is focused on creating fitness communities that change lives, which is our purpose.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And for everybody listening out there, I think that's the alignment integration everybody's looking for. It's like, how do I run my business and yes, be successful and make all the revenue and profit goals and all that? But these other feeders now, the game has changed.
It has.
where I was like, man, a few years ago, I didn't know starting the podcast, it would lead to all these cool connections and things. And I look and go, man, how many people have we brought onto our mortgage team? How many agents have come in and want to send us business? And all these things, you go, you just got to put yourself out there.
And that's even part of the difficulty finding staff. Like, they'll now come and listen to your podcast and be like, oh, this is someone I want to work for.
Yeah.
This is the type of man that takes a stand. I want to join this guy, right? Versus some Indeed ad when you're just another guy looking for. So, there's so many tentacles to it. But it starts with having the boldness and the power and the courage to put yourself out there and communicate a message.
Yeah, and you're doing it. So thank you for doing that.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
People are going to love today's episode. I know I'm going to go back and listen. There's always things you learn. And I'm listening to these things here like, oh, we could go there, we could go there. So we're probably going to have you back on. I'm just going to tell you.
You know, I come to this market often, so we'll make it happen.
I know. Cool. Well, guys, this has been another episode of Finding Your Competitive Edge. I'm sure you've heard throughout Forrest sharing his story, the ups and downs, the things that you can probably relate to. And you go, yeah, that was me when I got knocked down and this happened to me or that happened to me. We all have those stories. And as I listened, though, you could tell the empowerment and how he's reframing that story to say, I'm going to take this and use that for the betterment of not only himself and his family, but people around him. Until you share your story and you own it and you move forward, you're stuck in this victim mentality, and we talk about that. Listen to what we talked about today and find one area in your life that you can actually go implement this with yourself, your team, and those around you. Is what I've found in the journey. When you start sharing, you start opening up, Forrest mentioned it, you're vulnerable about what's happening. People come into your life, and people come into your life not only to help you, but that you get to serve. And I'll say this, one of my favorite quotes, Roy Vaden shared this all the time, you're most powerfully positioned to serve who you once were. So that former version of you is waiting on you to show up. So you need to show up today. Guys, let us know how this has impacted you. Always leave a review, like, comment. We love all that stuff there. And also let us know if there's anything that we missed or you need help follow up. We'll put the links in for Forrest, his event, his coaching group, and all of that. And also, hey, if you're local in Nashville or any of the markets Iron Tribe is, I'm telling you firsthand, my favorite place to go work out. I look forward to it. It's like 5-6 days a week. You can usually find me there. But what I will tell you is once you get that all aligned up, fitness can actually become fun again. And you build this family and camaraderie. So check it out, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Boom.